When we look at something like stabilization, what's happening here is probably 2 or 3 things are happening. So let's take that kettlebell bottoms up overhead press. Grab a kettlebell by the handle, that kind of ball of the kettlebell sits above it, and I press it over my head. The load in that kettlebell is quite unstable, so then I have to do a lot of this stabilization work, which leads me to being more stable in the overhead position. To quickly answer your question, I will say no, the bench press will not do the same thing that the overhead movement will do, due to the fact that weightlifting is more overhead specific and due to the fact that the shoulder is pinned against the bench when we're doing bench, and we don't have to stabilize it quite so much because we have that kinesthetic feedback. So to get a bit more in depth into this, what's actually happening when we're doing those slightly less stable loads during the pressing movements? Well, the first thing is we're just getting stronger. We're just doing pressing volume. Those muscles are getting stronger. Those motor units are getting stronger. We're becoming more coordinated. So if I'm doing any sort of overhead press, I'm going to be stronger, thus more stable. Second thing that's going to happen, you'll probably grow a little bit of muscle. That hypertrophy will help you. More of that biomechanical stacking makes you better and more stable in the overhead position. Now, what people will commonly talk about and why the bottoms up variation or the waiter's press variation is going to be more beneficial for stabilizational exercises is what we're really doing there is we're growing the pathway, or we're growing that map in our brain for how our shoulder reacts to the space around it. So if you imagine we're in a dark room and I have a torch, as I shine the torch around the room, I'll gradually get an idea for what's going on. And as I'm moving through space, my body is doing the exact same thing. It's relying on these afferent nerve signals coming back into my body or coming back into my brain, and it's learning where the shoulder sits in space as I do those movements. What essentially happens when we have a less stable load like the bottoms up kettlebell press is we shine the torch around a little bit more. So if I have a really stable load like a dumbbell in my hand and I press that dumbbell overhead, I'm moving through a very refined motor pattern. That motor pattern doesn't really change too much. And so the muscle contractions are almost identical going from rep to rep and set to set. When it's a less stable load, I have now these imposed demands coming from that kettlebell moving around, and I have to just utilize a small bit more muscle tissue. I'll have to contract in slightly different ways. And so I shine the torch around the room a little bit more, and I just get a better map for what's going on. To get even more in depth in this, when we look at the neural structures in our hands, in our legs, in our feet, the amount of nerve tissue we have there is what we're really looking to grow. And then understanding that those increased cross-sectional area of nerves will give me more information back to my brain. And then my brain will be able to transfer more information again and make me more stable with that. So if I was to do something like cut my forearm in half here, my dominant hand will probably have around 300% more neural tissue in it than my non-dominant hand will. What's happened here over years of writing and doing fine motor skills with this hand is I've increased that map in my brain, and I've actually increased the map in my arm as well. So it's a lot of neuromuscular stuff going on there. There's a host of other things happening as well, but to answer it very simply, I wouldn't think you would get the same out of the bottoms up bench press as you will from the bottoms up overhead press.
Bread Banana, I think this probably highlights the thing that I wish more people would follow through on. And it's something we talked about a lot this year as well. 2025 is how useful your assistance exercises are for your ability to improve your strength or improve your weightlifting or improve stuff for the sport. Obviously, we're huge proponents of the bigger movements carrying a lot of the weight, but you can't catch everything and do it all with just those big movements. The assistance work in the right places makes a huge difference to a lot of different things if you get them right and if they're the things that are going to be useful for you in your scenario. So the use of assistance exercises, this is just one example of many where things are incredibly useful and can really, dare I say, be a game changer for certain things.